Awesome. Okay, so slightly smaller group, but this is great. There's no rush to share. Take your time. We can go deep. We'll just play around with it and have some fun. And before we get into purpose versus personality, it would be great to check in with testing versus trusting. And I know that Jeff, you very kindly emailed out your thoughts.
Mm,
You feel particularly passionate about this chapter and you weren't able to make the call. So maybe
mm,
if we have a bit of space now, it'd be great to hear
yeah.
what.
I just think life is just one long experiment, and if we don't do things and have a go at things, then what's the point, really? So all my life, I've done some stuff differently, and particularly since I left corporate life, I guess, because when you're looking after your own destiny and you haven't got the comfort blanket of the HR department and legal department and lots of people around you. We've just played around with so much stuff over in my 21st year now. So yeah, over the years. And a lot of it is successful. A lot of it isn't, but that's fine. It's just worth giving it a go because all you do is learn from something. And I know it's a bit of a cliche, but it's absolutely true. So we've done some well, I class as great stuff. Both myself, and I say we, myself and my wife, who worked with me since 2012. I think she left corporate life in 2012 to join me, thereabouts. Um, just done some great stuff. It's and people still remember it. They still remember some of the things that we did back in 2014, 2015, 2016. And we've just developed so many great relationships from some of the things that we did um, and continue to do. And the same with my um, time in the music business. Just done some great stuff with some of the bands. The first band I managed, we just played around with stuff. So, and it ended up our big local venues, Bush Hall. We did a sellout album launch. None of us ever done anything like that before, but we did a sellout album launch. I negotiated with John Lewis at our local Westfield to kit them out in top of the range clothing and then for them to do a gig on a catwalk when they were doing a fashion show. And it's a bit like I think I posted the Steve Jobs video saying that the reason most people don't succeed is because they don't ask. And bloody hell, is that true? You know, um, well, I could talk for a long time about this, and some of the things that we've done that we're really proud of. Um, but I know other people will have things to say as well. But if you want to know more about some of the stuff that we've done, I posted experiments in the lab as well. That was a bit iffy because we posted some really weird titles to people, most of which people didn't understand. So um, and looking back at it, there's one that I can't remember what the workshop was about. It was such a wacky title, but just play with stuff, and it goes back to the children. We got Zach now, so he's a blank piece of paper, and he doesn't know what's right and what's wrong. He just does it. And why don't we do that? Why don't we do what we, being true to ourselves, whatever that may be for each of us, and just do it and then deal with whatever happens. Because if we play it safe all the time, sort of stuck in a rut. And I'm sort of thinking about the next choice actually, because I wrote a few things down about the next choice, and I'm sort of my mind's going into that. But the experimentation part is just such good fun. It's um, yeah, you never fail, never ever fail. You just learn and then go on to the next thing, and just formed so many relationships over 20 odd years, which we still got.
Hmm. I'm really curious. Do you remember a time? Um, and I'm curious because I have my own testing versus trusting, and my own what feels like an overwhelmingly insane amount of change going on, and I feel particularly stuck in a rut on several levels, and I'm curious to hear. Do you remember a time where that didn't make sense to you?
Say a bit more.
Where I suppose for me, playing it safe
Mm.
makes sense. That has always, to be very, very systematic and to consider all options and to be very rigorous in making
Mm.
sure I lift my foot to take a step forward and then I stay hovering with my foot there for a long time, looking around.
Yeah.
Where's the optimal place to place my foot to take the next step, right?
Yeah.
That to me as a way of being and existing
Mm. Mm.
makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm growing increasingly bored and frustrated. And
Mm.
there are many opportunities right now to go fuck it and have a go on
Oh.
many levels. And so I'm really curious if that's a way of being that's always made sense, or is this something that can be practiced?
Oh, without doubt, it can be practiced. I think it was on one of these replays. Somebody talked about that, putting one foot forward. I'm sure because I've watched the replays of the last 2 weeks, and I'm sure somebody talked about putting their foot on a tightrope, and it's not that one. That's not the first foot that is the one to think about. It's when you've put the second foot on. So, bloody hell, put the first foot on, and then once you've got the first foot on, and you're on the next foot, then you're on your way. And the other thing about a tightrope, which I read and I think is fascinating, is you don't balance because all the time the tightrope is doing that. So you're not actually balancing, you're continuously moving as you go forward. So I guess you could call it a calculated risk. And I think um, I I wouldn't do something that's going to endanger me or somebody else.
Hmm.
But if it's not going to do that, then why not give it a go?
Hmm.
I can give you a quick example if you want. We ran for doing a social experiment back about 8 9 years ago. We decided that we'd do a run a pop-up cafe where it wasn't it wasn't a normal cafe. Geeta, my wife, hosted, and then the expectation was that people would be met and introduced to each other, and we'd run some workshops and all that sort of thing. We've got no space. So somebody we know said, "Oh, you can. There's a shop going, and I think the landlord will let you have it on a meanwhile lease for a bit. All you got to do is pay the power and that sort of thing." So we walked in, and the place was an absolute bloody mess. It had been derelict for ages. And I said to Geeta, "Yeah, we can do this. We can just turn it around." So we got rid of all the crap, put a lick of paint on the walls. There was a leak through the roof. And when it rained, it actually came through, but we just called that our water feature. So we had a bit, sometimes in a storm, we'd have a water feature in there. But what we did was create, I mean, there's incredible stories of the safe space that were created for people. And I got no idea whether it would work or not. All I knew is that we could do something really interesting, exciting. And then we did it for a couple of months, I think it was. And then the local council heard about it and said, "Could you do it with us?" Because we really like what you're doing. It's like creating this space and that sort of thing. So we said yes. And that was a decision which was probably not the best thing, because I don't know if you ever worked with councils, but they're a bloody nightmare. They were, so they paid a load of bills, which is fine, but they just interfered pretty well. So nothing was, I guess, nothing was safe in terms of what we were going to do. And there was really nothing decided. We bought some kit. We bought a coffee machine, which I'm delighted to say I've now got at home, full-size coffee machine, which is great. Um, but we got no idea what was going to happen. It was just, let's do it and see what happens. So my view is, if you think it might be successful, for predominantly for other people, because what I like to do is to be able to give people hope of some sort. Give it a go. The program that I've just run, which you know about, Will, and I've got another one starting next Monday. I've got no idea what it's going to be like, but amazing. So do another one next week. Does that sort of give you a flavor, or do you want me to?
I think so. I think so. It's there's certainly a direction that I'm looking in and noticing some things that look very fun and also look very scary and unfamiliar.
Mm.
But I think um, to be rooted in this is something that can be practiced. I think that that's enough.
Of course, you can practice. You can practice. You could practice tightrope. You know that putting your first foot out. You could practice that, and within a short period of time, you'll have your second foot out, and then got to give it a go. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I got a skateboard when I was in my 50s, and I actually fell off a half pipe and dislocated my shoulder. So I now use a longboard because it's much safer than a skateboard. But I was going to bloody give it a go. I just fancied it.
Brilliant. Thank you. Anyone else want to share any testing versus trusting moments from the last week? Sean looks very thoughtful right now.
I don't have anything, but I just really love listening to you, Jeff, talking about it. I love your energy, the lightness that you have, and the playfulness.
Thank you.
It's really encouraging, and I'd love to know what you got up to. If you ever want to just do an evening where you just talk about your life, sign me up. I'd like to listen.
I've got a lot of years under my belt, Karen. Take a long time. Yeah, yeah, but I just I think I don't think I know. We've got, and it's all cliches. When I was running workshops, I used to put a flip chart that said cheesy sayings up on the board. So we had a parking space for questions later, but I also had a cheesy saying ones because there's so many cheesy sayings out there that are absolutely 100% true, and people take the piss out of them, but they're not. And this is not a dress rehearsal. Cheesy saying, we got one chance at this life. Cheesy saying, so live it to the best that you can do under the circumstances. And you got to work at it. There's no doubt you got to work at it. So, like the basics, it's the eat, sleep, move stuff. You've got to work at it because as you get older, things don't work quite as they used to. And I know that unless I use it, I did a little YouTube video on this, use it or lose it. Another cheesy saying. So I run, I cycle, I walk miles. Because at my age, unless I use it, I know it's going to seize up. And I see so many people around my age and they're having mobility issues. And I think, well, did you, I understand that there are health conditions where people have mobility issues. Got a good friend in Scotland. He's having real trouble. He's got all sorts of stuff. And that's a real health issue. Having said that, we have lots of conversations. He's now going out and walking around the local park, which he didn't think he'd be able to do 2 months ago. He was in hospital in ICU. Never thought he'd be out and about doing stuff. In fact, he spoke to his wife and she said, I thought I was going to lose him. And now he's out and about, even though he's still got some really serious stuff going on for him. And I admire him. I admire the people that I see walking. I'm just looking out my window here. I admire the people I see walking up and down on the road with a walker. These mobility walkers, or around the park earlier today, and there's a few people on crutches, and they're getting their exercise. They're out there. They're not feeling sorry for themselves. They're getting their exercise. They're doing something about it, and we can all do something. Even if we have severe impediments of some sort, we can all do something. And it is, for me, it is around the eat, sleep, move stuff.
Hmm. Beautiful. Shall we get into purpose versus personality? I'd love to hear from someone that wants to kick us off.
I would, but I said a lot.
You still can though.
I'll start because I've got to go at 8. Well, I'm not going, but I'll be driving for a few minutes. Um, the thing that, oh, it's not like I haven't read this chapter before or things like it, but I had a look at it again this evening, and I just, when you can hear the same things, you just hear it on a deeper level over and over again, and it just feels like completely new. Oh, the lightness, when you realize that you're not your story, and there's complete freedom, isn't there? Like, there's a few things that I want to do, and there has been some energetic tying up in the thoughts of, oh, it's just, this isn't my area, or it's not the kind of thing that I really enjoy or I really thrive in. I can just decide to do it. Like, who cares what I think about it? I want to do that. So I'm going to just do it. I don't have to make a story up or even waste any energy thinking about how in the past I may not have enjoyed it or may not have been my thing. I can just decide from now, this is how I do it, or this is how I'm going to be. I think it's just, yeah. I said here, I can decide and it feels lighter rather than struggling against my ideas of my recent identity or even my distant identity. Because even when sometimes I think about the stories, oh, I'm like I am now because this happened and stuff. I think, well, actually, when you go back and look at it, at the time when I was like that, when the thing happened, that wasn't how I was at all. It's absolute fallacy to make a story up about, to blame a certain situation or series of them, because when those things happened, that wasn't who I was. That wasn't how I was. Like, why would I look back and then attribute some random belief or I don't know, it's almost like going to a doctor and like diagnosing myself with something that had nothing to do with who I was at the time. It's just mad. And I've been doing that quite a bit. So I'm really quite excited to not do that and then to see how easy life can be to just make different choices. And this is a book about choices, isn't it? And I don't know, it just feels really, I feel a bit daft for the little secret ways, even though I know this stuff, the secret ways I've still been perpetuating the stories. And also how fantastic that it doesn't have to last for a second longer. That's it for now.
Thank you very much. Is anyone else here reading the Power of Systems?
I haven't ordered it yet, but I'm going to order it.
That's blowing my mind at the moment, and I'm seeing so much how this whole book, Crazy Good, is offering all of these different distinctions that, in a way, are moving what they call in the Power of Systems the paradigm of mind versus the paradigm of systems. So the whole process of not making life and the world personal, not making it mean something. And they call that in this other book, they call that the paradigm of mind. I can't do that because I am, or that isn't happening in my life because of some personality deficiency or something that exists in the past or some habits that you've seen practiced and played out over a period of time, and you go, oh, well, that's just who I am. That's the way I am. And like the example that that Steve gives in this chapter is seems to be around lateness. So, oh, I'm always late. That's I've always been late to things. So that's like this inherent part, and it's described in our language as this inherent part of us. Whereas the paradigm of systems is the paradigm of taking action, of stripping away all story and narrative and all personalizing of life and looking purely at, well, what is and isn't happening in your life? Okay, well, what are the systems that are currently in place that are producing that result that you don't want? And so, yeah, as I read this other Steve Chandler book, and I think he even says, because he co-authored this with a guy called Trevor Timbreck, something like that, I think. Steve even mentions in this book, he's like, oh, Trevor helped me see that most of the books I've written throughout my career have all been kind of pointing at this distinction. And now I'm back at Crazy Good. Oh yeah, wow, that's it. So what I hear in what you're saying, Karen, deciding, choosing exists in the world, the paradigm of systems, the paradigm of take action, create some sort of system, calendarize it, measure it. Okay, wow, it's happening now. It's creating some results. Okay, the results aren't quite what I want. What you're saying, Jeff, tweak it, experiment with it, play with it. Now it is producing the thing I want, rather than wrestling with the paradigm of mind, the personality, the story, the who we are calling us. If that makes I'm tired. If that makes any sense, yeah. So that's what came up for me when I heard you saying that, Karen.
Mm.
Would you like to share with the group if there are any areas in your life where this distinction's helping you at the moment, where you might be catching yourself and moving into deciding rather than wrestling?
Just in the thing that comes to mind right now is the tidying of physical spaces rather than anything else. Because I hate it. I hate doing that stuff. I'd rather pay someone else to do it. And I yeah, I've just been doing it. I've just decided, oh, I'll get it, and I've just not made it into a big thing at all. Been really quite playful and just done some stuff. And yeah, I even went round to my parents' flat, and I was taking all the pictures off the walls, and my parents' ashes are still there. And I was talking to them as I was going around, and I was saying, right, I'm going to put this in a box that's easier to transfer to my house, and it doesn't need to be on the wall anymore because you're dead. Like, I was literally laughing my head off, and you don't need to look at these pictures anymore because you're dead. And like, I can take them off the wall now. And I was roaring with laughter, and it just felt really light. And I thought I would just take a few pictures down that my brother wanted. Nice and simple. He wants those, put them in a box for him. Took them down. Oh, while I'm here, I'll just do that. And before I knew it, all the walls were sorted. All of the cabinets were sorted. I'd taken away everything I wanted. And and I was having a right laugh. And the Mission Impossible theme tune was going on in my head. So I gamified the whole thing. It was brilliant. Got loads done. So now quite inspired to do more. And there was no bloody story going on at all. And there was a small story starting to develop, though, of perhaps I am. Oh, I even heard that, like, oh, we just can't stop it, can we? Perhaps I am someone that can sort things out really well, as opposed to I'm not. That's another bloody story as well, honestly. It's just constant, isn't it? This creation of identity that we do. Oh, bless. But I'd rather it be a positive, useful one anyway. So, but I think we constantly need to be vigilant, don't we? And the expectations things. I'm so keyed into, not expecting things of others unless I've made an agreement. Still, though, I notice places where I am doing that. Even if it's a stranger, I would expect them not to throw litter into my front garden. I expect them not to, but like I didn't even know who it is, let alone have a chat about it. But it's still there, isn't it? It's just interesting. How constantly, like all of these subjects, they're so simple, and yet it are no, I'm just can't speak. I've got my teeth in. How the human nature just wants to keep going in that same way, doesn't it? And I just wonder, I think we get better and better at noticing it and quicker at calling out the bullshit of our stories. But I do wonder how much Steve gets caught up in things now. Just curious.
We could ask him.
I think I'd like to. Dear Steve, how much for your day? I bet he does because he's human. But yeah. But probably less and less.
I think that's the game. Less and less. Noticing is the game. All of this is about noticing. Most of the breakthroughs that either clients bring to me or I take to my coach or therapist is when I've noticed something. That's the exciting bit when you go, oh, wow. The mind blower for me, I sat in silence for 5 minutes. Page 152. The present creates the past. That was such an incredible moment. Now, what's beautiful about that moment is it's happened. I read this chapter again this afternoon, and I went to the bit, didn't have the same feeling. But when I read this a few months ago and I got to that, I put the book down and just sat and stared at the wall. I noticed so much in that moment. And I know that the preceding the few months that came after that one thing I noticed opened up this whole thing I wasn't seeing before.
And society is always not, like the media, everything that's just telling people you're like this because of that, like putting people into boxes. And it's such a victim place, isn't it, to play from? I love that. And there's a therapist where you get taught about the importance of the past on stuff like that. It's just, I loved it. Absolutely loved it. The freedom in there. If only they know it's true. And in fact, I saw what's his name? Oh, coaches American football teams. What's his name? Oh, he just posted something on Facebook today saying pretty much the same thing. It was really timely. What's his name? Oh, it'll come to me. But yeah, and it's everything in society is telling us we are because of something else rather than we are what we choose to be. So powerful. I'm
Yeah.
warbling. Stop me from going on.
No, 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 no.
Garrett Kramer. Garrett Kramer.
I don't have the
He-
energy to argue back. I'm just going to say no. I love listening to you, Karen. I love your shares. always do, and I know everyone here does as well. And that paradigm shift, that's what had me sitting there. I've done 9 years of therapy with the same therapist. I love the guy. I'm going to be honest. I Part of me wants to leave because part of me is I don't really feel like I need therapy anymore. I don't need to go into the past. It doesn't make sense to me to look at the past. And I get frustrated when, mum and dad gets mentioned and it's not me mentioning them. I'm kind of like, yeah, cool. I get it. Or looking at the world like narcissist, not narcissist. I'm like, okay, I'm kind of done with all that. But something keeps me going back. It's the person. And sorry, this is a slight tangent. It's I still feel the value in this person being in my life. Um, but I had been used to for 9 years, um, the past predicts the future. And so I lived in the past. I'd say that that's only shifted recently because of that moment, that noticing moment of, oh my God, I've just read this. And it's almost like part of me's always known that something's wrong with that paradigm and that I'm relying on my memory to look into the past and to dissect it. So, and how reliable actually is your memory? So the whole model is based on trying to remember. I'm like, well, yeah, but you edit stuff, you change stuff up. How many times do you rewatch a film? You're like, I don't. I thought that bit happened. I don't. It's not reliable. And there's something imprisoning about, well, this happened in your past, and you can't change that, so you can't change. That's embedded now. That's ingrained. And I know that every time, and I'm going through it at the moment, by the way, I'm not about like I slip in and out. Right now, all the life change that's going on, basically, I'm considering changing my living from a one-bedroom flat to a guardianship to cut overheads by a monstrous amount so that I can pursue writing and original music and not need to worry about earning. The level of shift in my mind from the status, this flat, or the story I've created around, oh yeah, one bedroom flat, Brighton musician, that's a great achievement. Like that's all bullshit. And so this shift feels like it's challenging so many of the different levels, or it's challenging on many levels. I can't remember what my original point was. Um, what was I saying just before that bit?
About not being a victim of your ideas of who you were in the past.
Yeah, yeah. And as a result of all the, not as a result, but I'm finding in considering all of these, what feels like big life changes, I'm thinking about the past again. I'm going back to it. I'm remembering things that were said, expectations that were placed, parental stuff, being sat down. It's like, we've paid money for your education. We expect a return. And the pressure of like, geez, am I really gonna go, no, fuck this and fuck whatever expect I'm gonna go and do this because I really want to. Right. And the point I'm making is every time I go back to the past, I have a shit time in the present. I'm not really present. I'm just sitting here thinking about stuff that's gone and happened that I have no control over, that I can't change, I can't edit, and I feel stuck. And it's because I'm in that paradigm of like, oh, this happened in the past. Oh, it matters. It matters so much. I can't change it. I can't move forwards. So yeah, there is so much freedom in coming back to this. The present creates the past. And it's the present that creates the future as well. It's all about learning to be here and now.
Yeah. It's funny, isn't it? Once you've read like a big chunk of this book, how the other you hear the other choices coming up as well, don't you? There was your parents' expectation, or did you make an agreement with them to like sacrifice the rest of your life and you're right, just for them, so that they got their money's worth. Good on them. Their choice to bloody put you through whatever they put you through, expensive schooling, whatever. Yeah, isn't it funny? Like, just keeps coming round and round. So simple. All of these choices, so simple, aren't they? I just was one thing I'll just quickly share. I had this thing where I've got money issues. I'm not very wealthy. I've got money issues. I've always had money issues. And I made this whole story about it. It was absolute bollocks, excuse my French. Absolute rubbish. I mean, yes, I did grow up with some very rich people that lived next door. And I looked at them and I thought, there's no reason why I can't be richer than them. I wasn't telling myself a poor me story when I was a child riding their ponies at all. And then when I was in corporate, I was earning shit tons of money. Like, I wasn't always poor. And isn't it funny how you can just tell yourself a story and act like, oh, it must be because of that. And it just wasn't, because I wasn't like that then. I've taken on a story and then just decided to, like, throw my shovel of shit over the past and say it's because of that was done in the present. So like our future's created in the present and our past is created in the present when we decide to lob our shovel of shit over it. Anyway, I'm going to stop swearing now.
Oh no,
Sit in the corner.
swearing's the best. I call it
I've been quite moderate today for me.
I call it emotive language. It's all good.
Thank you.
Gets the point.
Not because I don't have very, very good, I know lots of words, but some of them just don't hit it quite as nicely. Anyway, I'm going to go now.
Thank you. Thank you. Elizabeth.
Oh, thanks. There was something you said that made me put up my hand, but now I'm thinking of something else. Give me a minute to get it. It's like right there, but not quite on the tip of my tongue. This wasn't why I initially put up my hand, but it's got me thinking about what you were just saying, Karen. The present creates the past. And how much of if we're suffering because of things that happened in the past, so much of that suffering is how we're thinking about what happened, right? Like, it's not like the thing that happened. It's just like how we're thinking about that and how that's affecting us now. And it's just very, it's not based on what's now, right? There was one part I really liked. We don't have to be who we think we already permanently are. Like, something just really, really freeing about that. And just, yeah, reminder that we are at choice. And so much of so much of the choice of who we are right now can be motivated by who we want to be too, right? And connecting to that emotional energy to drive the behavior changed, to give us the freedom to play, to experiment, to test it out, which changes our present, which changes the current paradigm we're in. That's super freeing because it's all choice.
Yeah, that's one that felt really edgy to begin with. I think the first time someone said it's your thinking about the past.
Mhm.
That's where the real suffering is coming from. And
Mhm.
you know, I've since, this was months and months ago, maybe like a year ago or so. And so I've tested and played around and prodded that paradigm, and I've gone, oh yeah, no, that makes sense actually, because I'm fine one minute, and then I start thinking about, that's where I'm like, oh okay, I'm suffering now.
Yeah, yeah.
But it does make sense. One question I have, and I'd love to hear what people make of this. And Sean, I'm conscious you've got your hand up as well. Um, something in me very much still sees the value of, I don't know what you'd call it, maybe settling or becoming aware of or contextualizing the past and then moving on. I suppose my experience of having done therapeutic model work and looking to the past, then discovering coaching kind of at the right time, maybe 3 or so years ago, coming out of lockdown and then looking forward, it's like, okay, that seems to have worked really well. Um, but I'm curious. I'm curious to know, you know, is there a world, or do people think there's a world in which you can go, you don't need to go into the past at all? I'm undecided on that. And there's someone called Dr. Rani Bora, who I know is in the circles of people. I really, really want to do an interview with her on this particular topic as a professional psychiatrist and coach. I'd love to know her take. But yeah, it's something I'm really curious about.
Can I just say,
Can I just chip in?
oh yeah, no, you
Sorry,
go.
Karen, really quickly. If you really, really want to do that, then let us know in the next book club that you've done it, because I know she'll say yes. I'm pretty sure she'll say yes. So I'm looking forward to hearing confirmation that you've asked and she's accepted.
And she will say yes, because she's a bloody brilliant human being. And if you want me to put you in touch with her, I can do, because she's a cool dudette. Yes.
Yeah, I read a book recommended to me a couple of years ago by Nick. I think like in our initial calls, when I was like, I'm just stressed all the time. So let me recommend you a book. And I read it. I was like, this is like early days into understanding, you know, getting into the 3Ps and all this. I'm like, oh, this is pretty cool. I added her on Facebook, and I've had it's been an idea that floats around, and it'll come in. I'm like, oh yeah, must do that. I'm actually going to write it down this time, and but yeah, thank you for the encouragement. Karen, I think you were gonna
Well,
jump.
yeah, so in our family, we had a very, very big traumatic event 2 years ago. And there's no amount of saying, I shouldn't really, I know this is going out publicly, but there's no amount of saying to the person that nearly died, yeah, but you're all right though. Yeah, but here you are still. There's no amount of that, or oh, you just, like is going to do it when there's an embodied whoosh of adrenaline because it isn't settled. With my daughter who witnessed, I had to do therapy on her. There was and it took 40 minutes for her whole physiology to settle. So I do think there are some cases where we're so physically thrown into a flux that that's physically not settled, and the mind isn't also, because it's all together. So I don't want to go into too much detail about it because I could talk about the subject for hours. But I do think there is a time when you do need to settle something that happened in the past, particularly if there's a little part of you that still thinks you're in that, oh no, I'm just about to die moment. and they talk about, like a little part of you. It's not a little part of you because it's just a metaphor, breaking off and being in some kind of trauma cave and really believing like it doesn't realize that it survived, that it's still locked in that oh no moment. And most of the time it's sort of inactive. And then every so often it goes, wah. So I've worked with loads of people with trauma. It is it's quite easy to sort. And there is a degree of going back into the past and settling it. Sometimes looking at it from a different perspective, from a perspective of being safer than they thought, or having different information that they had at the time. So, but even that is recreating the past still, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Isn't it really? From the present.
Yeah, I guess so. Just listening to the language you're using, going back and it's almost like reframing. You're safer or
That's one of the things that you would do is reframe it, but there's lots of other things that you would do with trauma as well. Yeah. But yeah, it's still doing it in the present though, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it is settling the past. Yeah. And Gestalt therapy and things where you can have a conversation with someone that's dead, that you're not actually speaking to them because they're dead, but you can settle things by looking at things in a different, from their point of view or something. You can settle it, but again, it's still. So I think yeah. My quick answer then is I think you can go back.
Yeah, but you're to your point here, and you're speaking to it from. Well, you can speak to it from lots of different parts of you, but integrate, like choose and integrate, like an integrated whole. Yes,
integrating.
Yeah, yeah. It's not going back and putting yourself back in that mindset of who you thought you were then.
Oh gosh, no, that would be
more harmful. But speaking to an integrated, conscious, adult integration of lots of parts of you, right? But like choosing that part. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. And Karen, just quickly, you mentioned a certain type of therapy there. Jess, what? I've not heard of that.
Gestalt. It's just basically you can imagine having a conversation with someone that you couldn't possibly talk to. So it could be if your uncle died and there's things that you needed to say, you can say it. You can also do Gestalt with your addiction. You could separate out your addiction and have a conversation with your addiction from a position of it's not me, I'm objectifying it, and then say, hey, addiction, what's the purpose of you in my life? What do you think you're bringing me? And and then you can answer. You swap chairs, and then you can answer as your addiction. And it's amazing the kind of things that people will come up with from themselves.
That sounds. All of this is really, really interesting. So yeah, I purely for my own, like I can go and have a read up on that. Thank you, Sean.
Hello there. Oh, let me just lower my hand. Sorry. Do you know what? I know I've got a couple of things that I put my hand up for, but that last point there about the swapping chairs that Karen mentioned made me think of Tommy Cooper, the way he used to dress up with two different halves of costumes. So it was like the right side of his body would be dressed as a man, and the left side of his body would be dressed as a woman. And he'd do this whole sketch where he'd kind of switch between the two and kind of have a whole comedy gold. It's great. It just made me think of that, and I was like, "Ooh, you could have lots of fun with that." I wonder what costumes I could wear. Was the first thought that popped in. I'll be completely honest. But yeah. Gosh, I'm just trying to think. Again, similar things going back through the through all the nuggets that have come out. One thing that I thought of initially was what I call Spice Girl syndrome. So societally we and it speaks to this kind of personality thing, is that we're all victims of Spice Girl syndrome, where we've got the sporty one, sort of, the baby one, the Union Jack one. I don't know that that's the actual terminology, by the way. Being a Spice Girl fan and all that, but how the labels are attached, or we attach ourselves, or we reinforce from something else that other people have kind of noticed in how we've behaved at a particular point in time, and then it's like, oh yeah, that's who I am then. I'm the I'm the quiet one, or I'm the oddball one, or I am the sort of the outgoing one, and we then spin a yarn and reinforce the story based upon, well, I need to live into that. I need to operate in a certain way to that's me. Yeah. So people have defined me as that, and actually I quite like that definition. So I'm going to keep that, which is often kind of the case that we do, especially if it's something that we kind of think, yeah, it'd be kind of cool to do that. And that made me think of Jim Carrey, which actually is probably a weekly thing anyway. Me pondering on the the doings of James, and it was how you look at a lot of his early films, sort of like your Ace Ventura and The Mask and Dumb and Dumber and so on. And he played to character. So the characters a lot of the time were written with him in mind, because he knew that it would be a perfect fit, because he was the facial expression guy. He was just completely nuts and bonkers and brilliant, and then he took that little bit of a step in a slightly different direction. So when he did Cable Guy, it was still kind of comedy, but it was a bit more of a subtle, darker type character that he played. And then more recently, he's played more what would be considered, serious roles in that sense. And I remember in an interview with him, he was talking about how when he made that switch initially, people were talking about how the films weren't good because they expected him to be, I suppose it links it again with expectations, doesn't it? But they expected him to act in a certain way or portray a character that behaved in a certain way because he'd been typecast as, well, that's Jim Carrey. He does this type of thing. He doesn't do this serious stuff. What's that all about? And people almost being disappointed with the fact that he wanted to sort of push the envelope and do something, a little bit different. And that again was kind of speaking to the personality and the ability to recreate sort of who we are, and actually the fact that we've created this version, so we can just create something else, and that made me think oddly. Well, maybe not oddly, because it must have been the right thought because it popped in. But there was that thing where the guy had kind of, or I think it was a guy. He'd gone off and kind of paddled out on a canoe into the sea or something, and kind of faked his own disappearance and then reinvented himself somewhere else, and it's kind of, you hear about these people who just want to escape their life as it is currently and want to live something completely different, and they'll go off and you know, they'll find them in some far off land as, you know, sort of Viggo Mortensen's sort of long lost brother or something. And I was like, yeah, people do it. People do it, you know. And it's fascinating how we do put those locks on things to convince ourselves that we're unable to do that. Well, I couldn't possibly change. I couldn't act in a different way, you know. And then reinforce that and almost go looking for the evidence to support that, or create the evidence to support that, you know. And again, from another Steve Chandler approach, one of his books he's done, Reinventing Yourself, which is absolutely amazing. And he talks in that quite early on about a member of his family who was schizophrenic, and he was talking about that was one of the things that for him enabled him to see how somebody could exist with multiple personalities. And he was like, you know, when he was talking to the different people, you know, he said this member of his family wasn't changing the voice to kind of mimic sounding like a young child, for example. He was like, they actually sounded like a young child. They'd created this whole persona, and it was real, you know, certainly in terms of how they were talking and acting and behavior and everything. And for him, that was almost proof that we could create multiple personalities, you know, and how that expressed through whatever mechanism. Yeah, and I just found that fascinating, and that perspective, and something that Karen said, and I typed in the thing, and Jeff asked me to mention the story. It was the Michael Neal thing with the parking attendant, where he talks about going out and getting a summer job with all his college mates and what have you, and they all ended up getting jobs at the local stadium when events and stuff were on. And when they were given the roles out, everybody wanted to be, you know, in the bar, serving the hot dogs, all the stuff, so they were inside the stadium. And Michael Neal got given the parking attendant. So of course, first of all, he was like, "Oh, for fuck's sake!" So of course he trudges off out into the car park, and he's there, and he's kind of, you know, telling people where to park, and he's pointing. And then at some point, he was like, "Well, look, I'm here, so let's turn this into something different." So what he started doing was kind of dancing around and showing people where to go, and then he'd start kind of going like over there and kind of waving them through and all this kind of. And of course, after a few of these events, sort of the word got back to people inside the stadium. Hang on, why has he got the best job? Why is he out there enjoying himself, dancing around? We want to be doing that. You know, can't we swap with him? So, of course, he'd created this whole different approach to how he did the job. And it was the same job. But, of course, rather than sort of view it as something that he had to do, it was like, well, yeah, let's make this a bit of fun. And then, of course, everyone wanted to do it because they were like, well, he's getting that. And he's picking up tips off people because they're all like having a laugh while they're waiting to park the cars and stuff, you know. And again, that just reinforced that whole, you know, if the purpose of what you're doing is to have fun and to enjoy it, then actually that means you can change the way that you approach stuff, rather than it being, oh, well, I've just got to do this because this is the way I am. You know, I'm the miserable spice, so I'll just miserably park people's cars, you know. Yeah. So that I'm just trying to think if there was anything else that popped through with all the various usings. Oh, the other thing that occurred to me actually was when you were talking about sort of the therapy, and then obviously discovering coaching. You were like, well, I don't know if that was kind of the right time or what have you. But it reminded me of that thing that there's no accidents in nature. So it was the right time, and it was the right time because it happened. Because if it wasn't the right time, it wouldn't have happened then. Nature's timing is perfect. We know it's the right thing, or we know it should have happened when it happened because it happened.
Thank you. There were a couple of things there that really jumped out at me. Love the Spice Girls thing. That's great.
I can do choreography.
Amazing. The first the phrase "you know what they're like" sprung to mind, and I have heard this said quite a lot. Someone might be absent, or someone in the back of a van is being spoken about by people in the front of the van, and someone will go, "Oh yeah, but you know what she's like. You know what he's like. You know what they're. And there's one band in particular where there's a tremendous amount of, I'm not going to say the name of the band, but there's a tremendous amount of gossiping, and that seems to be a big part of like the downtime. And it's not bad stuff, but everyone's personal lives are excavated in this band, and so you've got to be careful with what you share. 'Cause you're like, yeah, I know if I'm not on the next gig, that's going to be one of the topics that gets brought up. And that's a phrase that's bandied around a lot. Oh yeah, of course, yeah, but you know what he's like. And I had a certain personality pinned on me, and it was really interesting to see how different people create us differently. Different people, they have never seen me how I show up in a coaching situation. They've seen me show up really inauthentically at times, and then the more I've caught on to, they see me as this. I find myself living into this thing. It's like, oh, they're almost expecting this. So I know that there's an element of truth. I'm going to magnify that thing. I've since made it a point of showing up just normally on gigs, and it's funny because then they've also commented like, "You seem very calm. Is everything all right?" And I was just like, yeah, this whole weird, thing. But I heard something. I can't remember the exact words you were saying that made me think of that. But I was hearing that in the first thing that you shared about identification, and then how we can play into it. And then the other thing was free will. I've had conversations with some people are very, very close to me, family, who question free will as a concept. Then there may be, later in life, they're like, "Oh, I was always going to end up like this. I was only ever going to do life the way I did it. So I don't know how much free will we really have." And they're really certain, but then you'll dig deeper into that conversation, and you start to see. And I'm not judging, but I just as an observation, I see the rationalizations or the justifications and the creating of story again in the present of the past. They're sitting here going, "Well, this, it was like this in the 60s. That's just how it was, and the 70s, and that's just." That has informed the last 50 years of my life. I've had that conversation with people who've like just turned 40, who are not later in life, but are looking back at the last 20 years. Well, yeah, I didn't know there was going to be a financial crash in 2008. And ever since then, my and it'll be like the last 17 years has all been as a result of this one thing. And that's the story that's been created. Yeah, that changed everything. And it's not to deny, that was a serious thing. I was obviously much younger then, but I remember a period of time when I was, 12, 11, that's all my parents spoke about. So I was like, something serious is going on, this credit situation. I don't know. Not despite the seriousness of it, but has that really created 17 years of choices and decisions along the way?
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? And actually, one of the things that just sat me on the back of the head again, then to remind me is the fact that insights are like a flickering lamp rather than a light bulb going on. Again, haven't been around sort of the 3Ps and that kind of thing for a while. I remember certainly early on becoming quite frustrated by sort of insight envy. All these people who would get massive insights and massive downloads at points in time, and I was just like, "Oh, it's not like that for me." It's kind of what's happening is my electricity supply not as good as theirs. It won't turn the light bulb on, But then I heard the and actually I heard it on the Chris Evans breakfast show when I was driving to work one time, and I was just like, that's how wisdom works. That's how insight works, and it's like it's like a lamp that's plugged in, but the bulb isn't quite screwed in properly. So sometimes you'll see stuff and it'll light up and it'll be like, oh, that's fantastic. And then because the connection's a little bit, it'll drop out and the bulb will go out again. And it's constantly that flicker between the two, rather than it being sort of, the bulb has been screwed in by Snow White's bluebirds and, I'm nestled in. But again, that's all right, because that's, the fact that we can see the light when it lights up is a great thing, and actually it contrasts them when we don't see it. It makes us aware that there is stuff that we can see, bluebird assisted or not. Yeah.
Lovely.
Cool.
Is there any more?
No, I'm good. I'll leave the floor for someone else to dance on.
Thank you. Jeff.
My turn to dance then, by the sound of it. So when I thought I'd just explain, because I'm going to just share with you my thoughts about what I took out of each bit of the choice. And what I do is I read the chapter and then I scribble a load of stuff in the front page here over the words, which I always like to read the words from the musicians. It's always really interesting. So this might be in no particular order, but it's just stuff that came into my mind as I was reading it, and it's sort of linked. So the first thing I wrote down is, and it was around the "I'm always late. This is who I am," and it reminded me of the work of Carol Dweck, who you may or may not have heard of. Carol Dweck, she's an American lady, and she is credited with, largely speaking, bringing the phrase fixed and growth mindset into mainstream. So that's her element, or her claim to fame, or that's what's been bestowed upon her, should I say. But it's really fascinating. And there's a great little video which I might post in the email chat thing that explains it really well. But what she suggests is that we got a choice. We either say, this is the hand I've been dealt, I can't do anything about it. It's always been like this. It's something you said just now, Will, with people you were talking to. It's not in my gift. I've always been like this. I can't do anything about it. So a fixed mindset. And then you've got people with a growth mindset who say, well, actually, do you know what? I think this is possible. And I'm going to give it a go. And people with a growth mindset tend to see, and don't just see, they actively seek possibilities and look for what they can achieve. And it's sort of like hope. And I'm a massive believer in providing hope for people, because without hope, you're sort of stuffed. So she's a really interesting lady. There's loads of stuff. She's got some YouTubes, but if you haven't come across Carol Dweck before, then I highly recommend that you have a look at her. So that's the first thing that came up for me. And then I went back to the stories that we create in our head, which we've already sort of spoken about, but we just create all this stuff, and it's a lot of what we create is a lot of rubbish. We just there's such a lot that is not in reality, and if there's a gap that we don't know or understand, then we'll create something to go in it. And very often that's, I can't do it, I'm not good enough, I'm an imposter, and all that sort of thing. So we fill those gaps with voices in our heads that are telling the untruth. So I got a friend, and he's quite a clever chap, actually, but he creates stuff about things that it's never going to come true. And so we have a conversation and say, hey, look, how do you know that's going to be true? How do you know? Oh, well, I don't. Well, what are you creating that for? Because all it's doing is upsetting you. So, voices in your heads. This has also been talked about a little bit. The labels that people give themselves, and how they can very often hide behind those labels and use it as an excuse. And there's another great guy I like, Wayne Dyer. Don't know if you come across Wayne Dyer. He's written a book called No More Excuses, or No Excuses, or something like that. And the essence of the book, it's quite a thick book, but the essence is, unless you know something is 100% true, there's room for doubt. And I know that we've talked about certainty versus uncertainty before. And uncertainty is great because it creates possibilities. When you're certain about something, then it's there. It's just there, sort of set in concrete, and concrete isn't very malleable. So yeah, what he says is it 100% true? If it's not 100% true, then there's wriggle room. There's something you can do about it. Another cheesy saying, the only reality is now. Hey, I just wrote it down. An imposter syndrome. And then the other thing that I talk about regularly to people is how compliant human beings are. We have these blinkers, these filters, and we filter all sorts of stuff out that's really, really useful. And as a result of these filters blocking useful information out, we tend to believe what we're told. So because I've been told this, it must be true. And my personal belief is, well, bloody challenge it, do something about it, have a go. And if you can sort of create the person you want to be. Oh, Will, we've had this conversation, the as if stuff, if you remember. So these filters are created by ourselves. It's just stories in our head that we tell ourselves that we cannot, we won't be. And yet if we challenge it, very often, not always, but usually, there is an opportunity to be had to do something that we didn't think maybe was possible. So yeah, the compliance about, we read signs, and we always stick to the signs, and if it's legal, then I will challenge it. And occasionally, like I was in John Lewis a while, a department store, Elizabeth, in the UK, John Lewis, and they have these staff phones, and it doesn't say they're staff phones, and this phone was ringing, and it was ringing, and I was waiting for my wife to look for something, so I thought, oh, what's ringing? I'll answer it. So I picked it up and said, hey, Jeff Langston, how can I help you? Most people wouldn't do that because they think that's an organizational something or other, but there was no sign to say, do not pick up this phone. So I thought, sort it. And I had a little conversation with the person the other end on the phone. if you behave as if you are that person, I've walked through secure areas because I pretend that I'm entitled to go there. And very rarely does anybody stop you. Very rarely. But most human beings are told to behave and do things in a certain way. And when you can break free of that, open those filters up, and you see the world for what it is, then it just opens up endless opportunities. So that was a bit of a ramble through some of the stuff that each of those choices chucked up for me.
There's so much to play with that, so thank you. And I love that you picked up a John Lewis phone and had a conversation. I love that. So much of this stuff, I see so much parallel between the coaching world and the literature, and punk. It's like punk as fuck. It's completely going like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm just not. Why? Because no, I really love it. And I can relate to there's almost an energy you give off when you walk somewhere like you are supposed to be there. We had can't remember, was it World Cup? There was some I don't follow football. Last Father's Day. I don't know what competition was going on, but a friend of mine does, and he invited me to this sort of cornered off bit of Brighton that had a big screen projected up, and all of the front bit was VIP, and you had to pay a lot more to go in there, and there were nice benches and all that. And I sincerely thought that he was in that section, so I just walked in. I walked straight past security and just walked into the bit. And then the match kicked off, couldn't find him. And I turned around and he was I saw him like stand up way back. It was like past this barrier. I was like, oh. And I looked around, I was like, oh, I'm not supposed to be here at all. But it was very funny. Yeah. So thank you, Jeff. Love that. Sean.
Yeah, absolutely. Classic, Jeff. Love it. And it's good to know there are other folks like us in the world. I'd have done that too. Answered the phone. Why not? But one of the things that what you were saying there that maybe come to mind about the filtering and the filtering out of things was an experiment that was done where they showed people an image of a room, and they were like, I'd like you to have a look at kind of everything that count up all the items that you can see that are all red, and kind of so people are kind of looking at this image and sort of trying to pay attention, and then they'd shut the image down and they'd go, right, okay, and they go, right, so how many blue items did you see in the room? And everyone's like, oh well, because they were that concentrated on looking at all the red stuff, they just didn't pay, even though they were looking at the whole image, they didn't pay attention to anything else. So of course, as soon as the question was about, well, how many blue items were in the room, it completely threw them, because they were like, oh, I wasn't looking for blue ones, I was just looking for the red. And I was like, yeah, that's the again, the little trick, that and like Jeff was saying about, in society, that's kind of what we do. We use distraction, or not necessarily us, but distraction techniques are used to get us to look in one direction rather than noticing the possibility of other things that are available to us, And then that reminded me of a conversation I was having today when I was delivering this course about the, that experiment they've done with the mirror, with the false arm, with the false hand on. So we get somebody to sit on a desk, and they'll put the hands on the desk, and then there'll be like a board with a mirror thing on. And while the hand's on what they'll do is they'll stroke the back of the person's real hand with the feather, and at the same time they're stroking what the person thinks looks like their arm, which is actually a false hand. They'll stroke that with the feather as well, so it reinforces to the brain that yeah, this is what I'm looking at. I can feel the sensation. That's my arm that I can see in the thing. And then what they do is they then hit the false hand with a hammer. And of course, the person pulls back their own hand because they think that that's their hand that's just been hit and they've got a pain response. And it's like, we've tricked ourselves. We've told ourselves a story that that's my hand, that's my arm. And when someone's done something to it, it's like, but it's not, and it never was. But of course, we can create these illusions and then convince ourselves that they are the absolute truth, you know. And how many green things are there behind me on the wall? None. Yeah, you know. But that's just the illusions that we choose to believe, you know, the choices of and even that just reminded me another quote. I remember listening to Bob Proctor, and he talked about people making mistakes. And, you know, he was like, look, we're going to make mistakes. It's part of the journey, blah. And we talked a bit about that last week. But it was interesting what he said. He said, well, the first time you do it, it's a mistake. The second time, it's a choice. And I was like, ooh. And he's like, because you've had the feedback from the first time to tell you that, right, okay, you know, I've done this and I made a mistake there. But then you've had feedback on it to say, right, okay, so if that's a mistake, if you do it again, it's an unconscious choice. And I'm not saying that you choose to do it as in I'm going to make a mistake again, but unconsciously, it's a choice rather than it just being a mistake again, because we've already had feedback to tell us, well, you knew not to do it. Oh, God, yeah, I knew. Yeah, I did that last time. And I was like, I find that fascinating because that opens up a whole thing of ooh, is that choice? You know, and again, I'm not talking conscious choice because we wouldn't choose to keep making mistakes unless you were someone like Charlie Chaplin, because you know you're going to get laughs out of it. But and even saying that, it just occurred to me, oh, would we? You know, because then does that create an illusion of the comfort? You know, it's the slippers and warm jumper that keeps us locked into the, yeah. Well, I always make that mistake. Oh God, there I go making that mistake again. I always do that. You know what I mean? And it becomes an unconscious convenience. Yeah. Just popped in there.
as something familiar, something comforting.
Yeah.
Something convenient that we can lean on.
Definitely. Yeah. Because that's, again, going back to the stuff we've talked about, because that's just who I am. You know. Oh, you know, again, that conversation you were talking about with the band members. Oh, you know him. Oh, he always does that. That's just him. You know. Yeah.
It's so funny because I've seen the other side, and this isn't to do with this band. This is years ago. I had a girlfriend in my final year of uni, and her friends. They all loved each other a lot. But her friends had a couple of particular ideas of like, oh yeah, that's just what she's like and all this. And I remember sitting on a rooftop one spring and her sharing with me, she's like, I hate it when they say that. I don't feel seen. Because I'm not like that. And she and yeah. And it was awesome to get to know behind. She had quite thick walls of like, you know, there was some sort of protective force field thing going on, but it was really amazing to see when she felt safe to not have that there and go like, oh, they know me on some level, but they've got that one wrong. I'm not like that. That was amazing. amazing to, I suppose, on several to feel trusted to be saying that, but also to see them not get caught up in that story. They're wrong.
Yeah.
That was cool. Amazing. I'm conscious of the time. Karen, would you like to finish the call for us?
Wow. There's just the one thing that I don't think that we've mentioned, and I can't find it in the book here in this dark car, but it said something, didn't it, about the where was it? The easy way? Come on, Sean. You know, the easy way, the easy choice is the or is it this one? No. Oh no. Someone saw it. It was such a big thing.
The easy choice.
Yeah, it was about gosh.
Was it the suffering's the easiest way to live thing, the Nathaniel Brandon?
It was there, yeah, that
Yeah.
kind of thing.
It was in section 4, all we are is dust in the wind.
Yeah, that's it. I just thought that was worth just bringing up. But, yeah. I don't have anything to say about it other than, yeah.
I love that. Yeah, permanent personality was such a no-brainer. Doesn't it seem obvious and simple? I believe I have a permanent personality and then allow it to run me. Sure, I was suffering, but who wasn't? That's a classic, isn't it? Life's shit for everyone. So, the amount of times I've heard that, it's like, yep, the sooner you accept this, is okay, cool. Nathaniel Brandon once said to me, suffering is the easiest way to live. I wonder what he meant by that. What's the bit that he's seeing as easy? No.
It's just to not question, isn't it? Just to run the program, allow that program to run, feel kinship in with your fellow sufferers, accepting that this is your lot.
It goes back to the temporary experience of ease. That moment when you're in the pub and you're around pint 3 or 4 and you're all cooking at this point. You're all just like, it's so awful. And musicians, no one respects us. No one wants to pay us what we're worth. Yeah, and it feels great. You're like, yes, these are my people. And, it's push back on power. And of course, you sober up the next day. You're like, nothing's different. No great revelation. We've all just not at £5 a pint. £7.50 in Brighton these days. Yeah, wow. Karen, thank you very much for pointing. I think I had glanced over that on my read through this afternoon, but that is something to play with. So thank you. Guys, I'm conscious of the time. Is there any more that wants to be shared or said?
From me, thank you.
Thank you so much. 3 months of the Crazy Good Book Club on this night. So thank you for making it epic and awesome. And I will see you all either on Wednesday or on Thursday or on any of the other calls, Monday next week at some point. Love you all. Take care.
Yeah. Bye. Thank you.